Hello, my name is Karlyn, Mann, and this is my science fair project focusing on individuals' susceptibility to distractions in a classroom setting. Alright, so the motivation I kind of found to dive deeper and really research this topic is the fact that in this day and age it's very important to understand what factors are contributing to students' sensitivity to distractions, specifically in this case their dependence on their cell phones while in class. In doing prior research and looking into relevant literature, I found that the skill of being able to multitask in a school environment closely related to students' difficulty focusing and concentrating on their work. In school, students tend to try and devote a majority of their attention to one thing, to their phone or to their school work, but whether that be notifications, Instagram posts, a new song that was just released, whatever, the time they spend on their phone underneath their desk may seem harmless, and they believe that they're still learning and they're listening to a lecture, but they're not really retaining the information like they would if they didn't have their cell phone. Another important factor I took into account prior to my research was neurodevelopment disorders like ADHD. I discovered that many child psychiatrists and healthcare providers agreed that ADHD is extremely underdiagnosed and undertreated within young children. In the research I didn't ask any questions about any disorders. I thought it might come off invasive, but it is important to note for further research and just to keep in mind for my study. And lastly, finding information on the difference between internal distractions and external distractions was crucial, since in my experiment I focus on the factors leading students to pick up their cell phone, and this is an external distraction. It's not really taking into account what they're thinking of and what they're being distracted in their own mind. The question I observed within my study is how do individuals react differently to distractions in an educational environment and what factors majorly influence their ability to be distracted. And my hypothesis was that if factors that influence students' sensitivity to distractions in a classroom environment could be reduced or eliminated, then students can focus and work efficiently. For my methods, the survey was given out to 9th, 11th, and 12th graders with a mix of both females and males in that group. More prior research helped me develop questions relating to factors that might influence the individual's sensitivity to distractions like sleep deprivation and phone usage. Then I also strategically created some questions as a basis to sort of compare their responses and observe the ones that mainly contributed to the purpose of the study. Originally, the survey was to be conducted online along with an in-person observational study, but unfortunately, when I became an e-learner and it was difficult to carry out this original plan. That being said, the study wholly relies on the survey, and the questions were altered so that they could be easily compared when I'm looking for my results. And all these students were chosen from the same small public high school in Melbourne, Florida, so the learning environment in the classroom setting was all similar. For my data, I basically collected all the responses, and since most of the questions were created in a yes or no format, it was easy to assign a number to responses and then compare them to other questions. I found that all the students who responded with yes to constantly being on their phone also chose science as the class where they used it the most, which was interesting. And in another part of the survey, I asked students how much sleep they got, and not a real surprise, but the data showed that participants who replied they got more sleep also spent less time on their phone. And for every participant, the reasoning behind why they felt the need to pick up their phone during the class was fairly similar. It can be seen that the blue line represents an urge to respond to someone. That's the highest, is relatively high for each participant compared to the other reasons. And then gaming is the green line, which was the lowest when I did the mean average for each response. The result was one of the more shocking ones, just because I kind of assumed that browsing on social media would be the highest. And I realized, though, that notifications from friends or family is what initially makes the students pick up their phone. And then whether they stay on it to go on other apps or do other things is a whole different issue. But the reason for them to pick it up initially is because they're getting a notification. So it did make sense when I sort of thought about it. In the first place, it would likely be because they feel the need to respond. In conclusion, some questions I asked related to personality type, and which I asked in the beginning of the survey, I kind of just had to exclude, and because they didn't give me any real conclusion or any evidence that personality type was a real factor to contribute to distractions. However, the same students that responded to the survey and claimed that they received fewer hours of sleep also answered strongly that they spent more time on their phones. And then based off the results collected from this study, subject interest and class type play a significant role in the amount of time students spent on their phone. For obstacles, limitations, and assumptions, I did have to assume everyone answering the survey was completely honest with their response, and it was difficult to find a super significant evidence for some survey questions just because of the few amount of participants I had, and it was difficult to obtain younger students, which kind of made me frustrated because I wanted to get a younger group of participants, but they were mostly all older high schoolers, 9th, 11th, and 12th. But a limitation is that results I expected to get could have varied just because of some participants being on their phone more during e-learning versus in-person learning. For future studies, though, a more in-depth study concerning core classes and subject type is what I would mostly focus on, just because I think that should be conducted to find how much significance class type really holds over students' ability to be distracted, just because science was so, the evidence was so strong that each result for science was where they used their phone the most in science class versus every other subject, which I just thought was odd. But the results didn't really tell me much because I didn't really think that I would get a significant result from that question. Also, just a larger amount of participants used would help create a more concrete conclusion, and a bigger variety of questions covered would help me discover how influential personality type could have been on an individual's sensitivity to distractions. Lastly, I wish I could have asked a question at the beginning of the original survey to eliminate e-learners from the study as a whole, just because I think that might have had some lasting effect on the results in the experiment. Thank you.